Every week we do a Q&A with interesting and accomplished members of the adaptive community to find how they persevered, how they innovated, how they built communities, and how they found solutions. Welcome to the Nametags Chat Podcast.
Welcome to the Nametags Chat Podcast. Today we are talking to Balucas. He's a guy who actually describes himself as an everyman Joe, but he also was thrust into some extraordinary circumstances in 2015 when a cycling accident rendered him paraplegic. He actually got hit, or we'll talk about that. I'm not sure if he got hit, did you? So now he was training for triathlons, and now he's back doing triathlons with the goal of doing the granddaddy of them all, the Kona IRONMAN Championships in October of this year. So Rob, thanks so much for joining us.
I'm honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
This is cool. So triathlon, can you describe triathlon for people, just because it's a long day?
Yeah, it's wacky. It's 3 sports in one morning if you're not doing an Ironman, if you're doing a shorter distance, but it's where you swim and then get on a bike and then you run. And there's like 4 different distances in racing. There's the sprint, there's the Olympic distance that's they do in the Olympics, that's a little longer. Then there's the half Ironman, that's a total of 70.3 miles. And there's the full Ironman distance, that's 140.6 total miles in a race.
140.6. So it's what, it's like 2.2 miles swim,
2.4 swim, 112 mile bike ride, and then a marathon, 26.2.
Yeah, just to cap it off, I mean, a marathon's a big deal for a lot of people. And not only that, in Kona, you're dealing with major hills and major wind and major heat, especially on the bike ride, right? Where it seems like you're not even going anywhere half of the time. How do you prepare for something like this?
I mean, put in the work, and it's kind of why I chose triathlon, is that it takes preparation. Before I did it, I wasn't a swimmer, biker, or runner. I didn't do any of those sports growing up. Well, I'm not directly answering your question, but I'll get there. But you know, when I it was something that I knew would be a challenge, that would be hard, and it's iconic, you know, like doing any distance triathlon is an accomplishment. And so, you know, it's kind of a bucket list thing. I was getting into my mid-30s, and I was kind of getting overweight with all the, you know, business lunches and whatnot at Applebee's.
So this is before your accident. This is when you were able-bodied. Okay.
Yeah, and what it was for me was just you know, you can't, for most of us, including me, like you can't just walk out, you know, and go do a triathlon in the morning. Like you need to put in some work. And that's what I was looking for, was just something that that I had to you know, train for every day and keep fit and eat right, and it held me responsible, you know, held me accountable to every day's action, what I ate, what I did in terms of training or not training, and then going out and performing on the day. And that's like, you know, that there's many lessons in there that are applicable to life.
If you didn't do this stuff before, the running, the swimming, the biking, how quickly did you take to it? I mean, this is because you're talking about equipment, you're talking about buying the bike. I mean, granted, the others are relatively easy, right? You buy a suit, maybe a wetsuit, yeah, and some shoes, but bikes are specific, they're expensive, technique, training. How did that work? Like,
here's the funny story. So at the time I lived in the Bay Area of San Francisco. I wanted to do the Malibu Triathlon because I went to college at Pepperdine, and my joke was I get to chase J-Lo and Terry Hatcher, famous, you know, movie stars, around, because they were known for doing the Malibu Triathlon, and there's always a celebrity division. So it was an excuse for me to go out there. And what I did in the Bay Area is I took spin class when it wasn't cool for men, you know, like I took spin class, and I really enjoyed it. And then I played a lot of pickup basketball, but my back started giving me a lot of problems. And so I started getting into spin class. And then for running, I'd go out, and my only goal was to keep running for 15 minutes. Like that was my first goal, and I couldn't do it. And then swim was like in the 2-lane or 3-lane basement pool at 24 Hour Fitness in Concord, California, where, old, like literally 80-year-old women were lapping me. Whose kids were taking them to the grown adult children were taking them to the pool, and that was their therapy. Like they were just sharks. But anyway, that's what I did. And then when I got to Malibu, I rented a bike from a local bike shop. Having never really been on the road, which I really don't recommend. And I bought a wetsuit and got out there and sucked at the swim. Like every 10 strokes, I stopped and like took a breath, looked around. I'm like, okay, no one's pulling me out of the water. I'm not drowning, so I might as well keep going. And finally made it out of that, got on the bike and like immediately loved the bike, especially on Pacific Coast Highway, on the Pacific Ocean in Malibu. That was amazing, but it was scary because, I had never contended with winds and hills and people and cars.
Yeah, you had no bike handling skills. They don't teach you that at spin class.
Zero. And it was exhilarating and scary and awesome. And then, and then on the run, it was just survive. It's like all of a sudden you got into like probably the heat of the day right at the beach, and it was just survive that. And I crossed the finish line. I think I have a picture of me, my hands in the air and my belly out. And I'm like, yeah. And I did, like, I wasn't upset, but I was so annoyed with how poorly I did in the swim. I'm like, I'm coming back next year. And that's how triathlon hooks you.
Coming back next year, and you're going to train really hard.
Yeah. Now that I know a little bit more, I'm going to, work on the things that I think I need to work on, and every year it's just that, you learn a little more and you do it a little better.
But were you working with a coach? Were you working with a club? I mean, you're working on the things that you need to get better, but you didn't know anything.
Yeah.
So how did you know what you needed to get better at?
Well, I mean, it's one of the funny stories is that the first year, I think I did the swim. This is an Olympic distance swim for people who know triathlon. I feel like it's maybe 3/4 of a mile for reference. Don't quote me, but I did it in like an hour, and I want to say either like an hour 15 the first year, which is insane, like insanely slow. And then the next year I said, I just want to finish under an hour. That's my goal. And that's all, and so I got in the pool more. That's all I did was get in the pool more, and probably like swimming like golf. It's very technique driven, and I just practiced my horrible technique more. And I finished in 45 minutes, and I was, like, oh, I killed it. I crushed it. Yay. And then 2 or 3 years later, when I did it, I was talking to some guys when we were starting the race, and they were like, hey, remember that year when the current was perfect and we all crushed it? And I went, oh, so it wasn't so much me as it was the current, and I wasn't so amazing as I thought I was, But then one year I moved to San Francisco. I started swimming in Aquatic Park, which is right in front of Ghirardelli. I was one of those crazy people out there in the water that you see when you go visit San Francisco, swimming in that little cove. And then I joined the Golden Gate Triathlon Club because there was one year, 2015, that I was like, I started the year and I just said, I'm going to join a triathlon club. I'm going to get in the training group, and I'm going to get some serious coaching on this stuff. And yeah, we set out a plan. We did a sprint distance, I don't know, 60 days into our training. And then we did an Olympic distance, at probably 3.5 months later at Wildflower, one of the last years of Wildflower, which is like the Woodstock of triathlon. And then those of us who were like crazy were like, hey, let's do a half Ironman next. And there's one in Santa Cruz, which is like an hour drive, right out of San Francisco.
Wow. So just going back just a little bit, you said Olympic distance is 1.5K swim. So that's 0.93 miles, right?
Yeah.
And then 40K bike ride and a 10K run. So 24.8 ride, and then a 10K, 6.2 miles. So yeah. So you were basically, you're almost doing a mile when you were doing that, when you were doing it in an hour, then 45 minutes. How did this, so you ended up having an accident.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened?
When I said my friends and I were going to do the Santa Cruz half Ironman, we we were nuts. Like we, our idea of a good time, I knew I found my crazy little tribe because we thought a good time on Friday night was Masters swim and then getting up at 4 a.m. on Saturday morning and driving across the Golden Gate Bridge and going up into, world-class riding out there in Marin. And the Labor Day, the weekend before the Santa Cruz Half Ironman we were supposed to do, we were riding Lucas Valley Road, which is where Skywalker Ranch is. Lucas, does all the sound for the Star Wars movies. And it's a very common route. Once you go past the ranch, there's at the top of the hill, there's a big rock and it's called Big Rock. And you go down the other side and into Nicasio and out to Point Reyes. And it's this beautiful 45-mile ride. And on the way back at mile 40 or 45, when you come back past Big Rock again, going back home, there's one turn that's known for crashing people. It's the fire, and rescue, all those people know it well because it's just this one turn. Because what happens is you kind of have some gentle turns once you come off the top and you're going downhill and building speed. You have some gentle turns and then one hard left that doesn't look visually as hard as it is. And I hit that way too fast. And I lost control of my bike and I regained control of my bike just in time for, me to look up, see the W lines going that way for the next turn. And I'm going over the hill, over the side into these trees. And I don't remember flying through the air and I don't remember landing. But I remember thinking my last thought was like, oh, this is it. Like when you're a cyclist, you're going to pay your dues and, get doored by a car or fall over and scrape something or, sprain something, break something. And I was like, oh man, this is going to be my injury, my cycling injury. And I looked when I didn't I don't want to say I came to because it wasn't like I was out forever, but when I opened my eyes, I was like 20 feet down the hill looking up and there was a log that I may have hit in the air or I may have just landed on down my left side. It basically broke my left collarbone, cracked all my ribs on the left side, burst my lung or collapsed my lung. And one of the two, burst collapse, and a L1 burst fracture in my spine.
Oh, okay. Okay. It's easy enough to go start talking about the hospital here, but yeah. You were 20 feet down an embankment. You weren't riding with anybody.
I was. The crazy thing, I was riding with 30 people or so, but I was third down the hill. I was chasing the other two in front of me. But we were so spaced out in these turns that we didn't see each other. So I was basically alone. No one saw what I did. And when everyone passed me, they were up 20 feet and on the other side of the road, and navigating their own stuff, themselves down those turns. And I wouldn't imagine they would have heard me, but what happened was there were some guys going up the hill. So they were on my side of the road. They could see me clearly and I didn't know them at all. They were on mountain bikes and they were just, creeping up the hill because it was a climb. And I said, hey guys, I need help or whatever I said. They immediately saw me, ditched their bikes and ran down the hill and found my phone 10 feet up the hill, which was ringing, and I said, I got to call you back. I need to call 911. And I'm, laying there calling 911, just playing it safe, not trying to sit up or anything. It wasn't like an instantaneous, oh my gosh, I know I can't, I broke my back. I had this tingling sensation in my lower body. I could move my legs gently. I couldn't get up at the time, but it didn't, I couldn't sit up, and it didn't, I don't know, occur to me that it might be because my back broken. I just thought, okay, number one is I'm having trouble. My body feels weird. I should probably not move so I don't, break anything else, and just chill and play it safe.
And how did they extricate you? This sounds like you were deep in an embankment.
Yeah. They had the ambulance and the car and the police cars and the fire truck, and my friends were going past the back end of the pack were going past, and they were like, oh man, I hope that's not one of us, and because they were 10 minutes away from the end of the ride, so they were all gathering in the parking lot, and I had my car full of friends. When they got there, they were like, where's Rob? Because we were going to do a run after that. and all their shoes are in my car, you know, and I have the key. And so, yeah, that's who was calling me. But they cut all my clothes off to make sure nothing was sticking in or sticking out. And then they strapped me to a board and carried me up the hill into the ambulance.
And were you at the time, were you like, did it get more serious as they were taking you out, or were you thinking
it got less serious? Like,
really?
I got into the ambulance, and like I said, I could move my legs and I could feel them at that point. And that's a weird point of my injuries, you know, spinal cord injury story. But
because you can't now.
I can't now. In the ambulance, it was me and one guy, the tech, and I was kind of breathing heavy, and he looked at my vitals and he's like, "Bro, why are you breathing so heavy?" And I just took a good breath and calmed down, and I was like, and breathed normal. And I was like, "I don't know, man." And he literally said to me, he's like, "You got a broken collarbone, you know, you're gonna be on the mend for a few months. You'll be back. I mean, you'll be back on the bike in a few months." And I was like, "Yeah, I will." And they took me into the IC, you know, got to the hospital, which was close by, and everything, you know, X-ray shows this, CT scan shows this, MRI shows that. And it was just like, okay, you have broken ribs, you know, or cracked ribs in addition to your collarbone. Okay. You have a collapsed lung. Well, okay. You have a, you know, L1 burst fracture. I'm like, I don't know what that means, but no more tests, because that's enough for today. You know, and they do the thing where you, like, you know, push against, you know, put their hands against my toes and like push down, you know, push up on your, you know, push up with your feet against the hand and straighten out. They bend my knee, straighten out the leg. It was weak, but I could do it. And it went away in the next 72 hours, which is kind of unheard of. And they took my case everywhere eventually, because they've never seen people lose. Not never. I was, you know, there's not enough critical mass of case study for them to know or tell me what happened. You know, there's theory of like my thoracic column, which is right above that L1 vertebrae, swelled up, so it pinched the spinal cord. That could be part of it. They found transverse myelitis, which is, you know, in one like horn of my spine or something like that, probably as a result of the shock of it all. And, you know, those things combined probably all add up to after the fact damage of my spinal cord that cut off feeling and movement of my legs. That's the running theory.
Wow. I mean, but it is strange, isn't it? I mean, spinal cord injuries it seems like no two are the same. I'm sure that some doctors would tell you, you know, that it's standard or whatever, but it seems like there are a lot of exceptions to the rule, and you were an exception to the rule. So you went in thinking, "Hey, I broke my collarbone. Like I'll go home tonight."
Yeah, I don't get to do this Ironman next weekend probably, and that's gonna piss me off. That's what I'm thinking about. That, you know, the classic joke, "Doc, how's my bike?" You know, my carbon fiber baby that I'd finally bought after renting for so many years, that I got the nice carbon fiber wheels, and it was a Cervelo, you know, and it was pretty, and everyone complimented my bike, and it was basically brand new. It was 6 months old. You know, I'm like, "How's my baby?" Like, it's at the fire station. We're not sure yet.
When did you find out? Because you went from thinking that you'd get discharged that night, maybe the next day, and you might not be able to do the triathlon, to you're in the hospital for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. How long was it for you then?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it was all over, it was something like 4 or 5 weeks in the hospital, where I had an extended stay in the ICU just because of beds. They couldn't move me out because they didn't have another place to put me for a while. So I'm kind of hanging in the intense unit. It's literally, you know. And then I went to UCSF for a couple of weeks because they thought maybe it was something vascular. So they wanted to do a test there. So they transported me there, and then you know, there was a month or so of rehab at Santa Clara Valley down in San Jose. So it ended up being 3 months total. But yeah, that kind of like that slow, like, I mean, my ignorance of never having spent a night in the hospital in my entire life up until that point, I feel like it served me, that I was just ignorant. I was just like, okay, what now? Okay, what now? And, I grew up in karate and I have a very high tolerance for pain. So, like that, I've had to learn how to like change my scale, because my, what I think hurts or doesn't hurt is different than I think the average person. And so, once it doesn't go away and hangs with you, it's like, okay, that wasn't like, I block, what, like a karate thing where like you got hit and that's going to go away soon. That feeling, that tingle is going to go away soon. This is like the same day in and day out, and I can't sit up.
So were the doctors talking about this? Were the therapists talking about, did they start looking at you as a spinal cord injury?
Oh yeah, immediately. I mean, I was in a very fortunate place. My surgeon is one of the, like, he's the go-to spinal neurosurgeon in Northern California. He's he's the top guy at UCSF. He lives in Marin. He was able to took my case to Stanford to be looked over. Like my surgery was textbooked, doing the screws and the rods to support the L1. They put it back together, grafted some other bone, and then, put screws in the 2 vertebrae above, 2 vertebrae below, and rods, to hold it all together. And then, and it was mysterious to him. And and I also, my general doctor, I'll never forget him either, because he didn't say, and I didn't really ask, again, probably out of ignorance, what are my chances of walking again? And everyone has that story of saying, you gave me 2% and I'm going to beat those odds. I didn't have that experience or that conversation, which I thought was good for me, because it was just like a slow burn as we went step by step, day by day, to see what was returning or going away, to like let it
settle
dawn on
or
me.
whatever.
Yeah, that I, like, this is going to be a long journey, in the end, we don't know, because my case is weird and unique, and so, day by day, I just remember like a stretch of days in the hospital where I was like, okay, this is more serious. Like, this is going to be a longer haul than I thought yesterday.
You said you'd gotten bitten by the triathlon bug, like that very first time where you're like, okay, now I'm coming back. I'm going to train harder. I'm going to do this better. Were you thinking about triathlon while you were in the hospital too?
I was forced to, in a great way. I probably shouldn't start out saying it forced to, but the triathlon was the next weekend, and my training team, who I'd spent, this was September, so like that entire year with, we spent a lot of time with each other and became great friends. They all did it. They took Sharpies to their arm and dedicated the race to me, and wrote Rob with a heart with a Sharpie, and made signs, and they all texted me and called me, and I was tracking them all on my phone that day. And it was super cool. And they were nuts.
And how long ago was this?
This was September 2015.
2015. Okay.
Yeah. So they, when I saw that, it was kind of, and this is what especially Ironman does to you, because you put in so much work and training over a long period of time, that when you don't get the chance to put it to test, it's really annoying, and so for me, I was like, I spent all year getting to a point where I could probably cross the finish line at a half Ironman, and then I don't get to try. And that pissed me off. And that's where I was like, I'm going to do a triathlon within a year. I'm going to walk across that finish line. And then, as I was saying, like, as it dawned on me more and more, I was just like, okay, maybe I'm not going to walk across the finish line. Then I got on the Google. I got on the Google because I have my iPad, and I went wheelchair triathlon, and up came a grainy picture of who else but Carlos Moleda, who I didn't know, and I didn't know it was him at that time. But that was my download, save this picture. All I have to do is do what that guy did, because I don't have to recreate any wheel. I just need to, this is this is, you know, just like triathlon, you know, there is a formula. There's a lot of formulas. You just got to choose one and follow it. And I was like, okay, this guy's done it. I just got to figure out, you know, how he did it and do what he did.
Which I'm sure you've gotten to know Carlos, and in knowing Carlos, just doing what he did sounds a whole lot simpler until you actually get to know Carlos. I mean, he was the guy who was like, you know, what he had, you know, pins sticking out of his leg when he was in his first racing chair because he'd been shot in his leg trying to get Noriega out of Panama. So, I mean, it is a daunting task, but that's also kind of the cool thing as you're leaving the hospital is like, well, it's been done and I need a challenge. I've been robbed of producing on the challenge that I had. How much did that momentum keep you forward? Because in some ways it's like you don't know what you don't know, right? Your naivete is like, yeah, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it within a year. And were you looking to do a half within a year? Were you looking to do a whole or what? Or just
I was fine with the sprint.
Okay.
But I knew if I was doing a sprint, I ended up doing 3 because I was just like, I mean, one was that, you know, the first one was just a test. Because the triathlon community is small and it's small and it's supportive. Like not only my own triathlon, you know, team, but the entire club in the Golden Gate Triathlon Club. And like, I always get this in Northern California as a whole, like, you know, people vaguely know my story or know who I am because they know someone who knew me and they, you know, and because I was, you know, because we're this triathlon's a tight community and they came to my aid like mad. And that was awesome. But I'm not answering your question. There was a part that you said about, there's a part about just Carlos. And yeah, when I finally figured out as much as he did, I was like, you know, I just, you know, my goal is just to do it once, you know, and I'll be happy. And, you know, that'll be cool.
Hold on, let's back up a little bit. What Carlos did, I mean, Carlos was a Navy SEAL.
Yeah.
Got Noriega out of Panama, or trying to get Noriega out of Panama, got shot, ended up paralyzed, got shot in the leg as well. He's done Kona numerous times, world champion,
five-time champion. He's done it more than, you know, he's done the race more than that, but won it 5 times, including the year I got hurt. He decided to come back. You know, that was the year he decided to come back and do it. And then went on to like this, my 2015, his 2016. So what happened was one of the people that I trained with worked for Alan Shankin, who's on the board of the Challenge Athlete Foundation in Northern California. And she said, hey, I told my boss about you. When you're ready, he would love to talk to you. And I'm like, great. When would now be a good time? And, you know, I immediately got on the phone with him as quick as I could. And he's like, hey, when you're ready, we want to support you. I'm like, I want to do a triathlon within a year, you know, and I was, you know, like I feel like there's only like 2 or 3 or 4 maybe archetypes of, you know, spinal cord injuries, like your reaction to it, you know, and one is the blissful, ignorant, like, I'm going to go rock the boat, you know, I'm going to go destroy the world or, you know, whatever I'm trying to say. I'm going to do something monumental, you know, out of this. And that was me. I was one of those. And
well, you were following Carlos because I mean, Carlos left the hospital and he went from Virginia Beach down to Florida, right, in a racing wheelchair.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I think his quote was like, you know, I think it was something I found, he said, he's like, if I have to be the guy in the wheelchair, then I'm going to be the best guy in the wheelchair. And I'm like, yeah. But what I'm getting to is what Alan Shankin got me to was an invite to a triathlon camp at CAF headquarters in San Diego. And who is going to be the coach but Carlos Moleda? And again, I don't know that he's the guy whose picture I downloaded in the ICU, you know, and but like every day, so like you know, he's just lauded by everybody there, you know, and so I already kind of got a feel for who he was, but I had the fortune of being in the same car with him when we were going to the ocean, when we're going to eat, when we're going to somewhere else. It was like Jamie, I forget Jamie's last name, paratriathlete guys, Jamie and Carlos, Ben, this guy from Utah, and me. And so like we go home at night, my roommate and I are to our dorm room and where we're staying, and I Google Carlos Moleda and I learn a little more. I learn about Panama, you know, and then I get in the car with him. Hey, Carlos, can I ask you about Panama? You know, I get the the story, like I have my own personal podcast interview, like every car trip, like he tells me about Panama. Then I go back, I go home that night and I'm Googling, I'm like, this guy's freaking won the Ironman, like, Kona World Championships. And I didn't have any, drive to get that far back then. And I was like, five times. And the last time was this year and he's like 54 or something. And then, and then he coaches this camp. And then he goes on to do some volunteer work in not Nepal, but he did some volunteer work and then summits Kilimanjaro like you did.
Right.
And I had no idea he was going off to do that, later on in the year. He didn't talk about it at all. And I was just like, man, this guy, I'm not trying to do all that. I just want to cross the finish line at the, historical, mecca of, Kona. That's it. That's perfect for me.
You started out that Malibu race with a rented bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
When you get into paratriathlon, you not only need a bicycle, a hand cycle, but then you also need a racing wheelchair. How did you get this equipment? Because you can't even train without that stuff. You're not going back to your spin class.
Yeah, I will say, the funny thing about that is the only thing that made me cry in the hospital was not, the prospect of what could be. It was the way that this community, like I was talking about before, rallied to support me. And like, it just kind of validated, the time and effort that I put into relationships, that I really valued relationships above a lot of other things. And, there's, you can focus on a lot of things in life. And for me, I really, there's a lot of times where I probably should have been working or should have been doing something that probably benefited me more that I spent, with people, in my, just in my life up until that point. And when I needed it most, they came to me. And when I was,
and this community you're talking about is the
so it was
triathlon
it started with my triathlon community and my extended family. I have a very big family. I'm the youngest of 35 cousins. It started there, and then my friends who were not in triathlon in San Francisco, then my high school friends from Seattle, my college friends from Pepperdine, like it just spread like wildfire, while I'm just laying there in the ICU. I mean, they had to make a spreadsheet for coming to visit me in the hospital. So because they were, there's too many people coming at once at the wrong time. And then the front staff of Marin General came up to find out who I was, because they were like, who are all these fit, sexy people coming in droves to visit this guy in the ICU? They're like, when we see this type come in the door, we're like, yeah, 3rd floor ICU room, whatever, and it was a running joke that was really funny. But to the equipment point, like I was telling them, like I was telling a few of them at a gathering that like I have this goal. This is the equipment. I need all this equipment. It's literally like 15 grand total to like, really get what I want. But I just don't want to feel like a charity case. I don't want that feeling. I don't want to be that. I don't, I hate to be that in my friend's eyes. And I had this whole story. My friend just said, Rob, shut up, squash all that, publish the fundraiser, and we will effing fill it. And I said, and she didn't abbreviate. She was like, we will fill it. And, and you need to shut up because we will support you. And sure enough, like I asked, I put 15 grand on it wasn't GoFundMe, but the fundraiser. And I got 17 in 4.5, 5 weeks. And, it put me beside myself, and I was able to order my equipment. And because of how long it takes to custom, build all that stuff, it literally shipped and arrived a day or two before I arrived in San Diego for that triathlon camp. It was, and then I did my first triathlon on a borrowed hand cycle, and I didn't run because I didn't have a race chair. There was an Oakland triathlon. That was kind of my test, get in the water, swim. There's a lot of para support there. And then like 2 weeks later, I show up with everyone. Jamie Brown is the other coach's name, and Carlos and the rest of the CAF crew, and my gear. And I got on the first time, and it was like, I think it was the next weekend or 2 weekends later was the sprint triathlon in Santa Cruz. So it was the same beach, same water as what would have been the half, same, same spot. And so it was funny because, I remember, I know now getting those stares of like, you're going to do like a full on triathlon, next weekend. You just got your equipment. I'm like,
well, you weren't fit. I mean, you couldn't have really been fit. You're coming out of the hospital. You're still adjusting to your new body, your new muscles, using your arms instead of using your legs. And then you have to get the technique, like getting into a racing chair. I remember the first time I got into a racing chair, it was hard to go straight. You're on this side of the road and you have to kind of have the front wheel steered into the crown of the road to a certain extent, or else you just basically feel like you're going off the road, or you push twice and then you steer, and then you push twice and then you steer.
Yeah.
You got your equipment and 2 weeks later got into a race. I mean, was that enough to drive you crazy in the race?
Well, it was like that race was like the I don't know, whatever division USAT championship. And so I forget his name. There was a guy from he lives in Puerto Rico, who was kind of like the golden boy. I know him, and he was there. He was like on point. The great thing is that there was a lot of other para there, of all types, limb differential, vision, and which comes with a lot of support. And there were some other people who were kind of in my boat. It was their first triathlon and they weren't that great. And I remember the three of us kind of swimming together, super slow, being at the midway point, and just kind of, I stopped, they stopped, we all stare at each other. We're all struggling. It's freezing cold. It's like 56 degrees in the water, and we're just like, not going to drown. No one's telling us to get, no one's telling us like, your race is over, get out because you took too long. So, it was the same. It's what I learned in that first one in Malibu. It's like, I don't have a fear of drowning. There's, no one's pulling me out of the water. So I might as well keep going.
What was the exhaustion like finishing? I mean, this was a short triathlon, but I remember doing my first 10K, and I did my first 10K, I think, in one of those old stainless steel racing chairs. Could barely get the thing to go straight. I think I did an hour and 10-minute 10K. I was so exhausted. It might be some of the most exhausted that I've ever been in my life. So you did a 10K, because you did a sprint, an Olympic, right? So in that race?
I mean, the swim and then the bike. I mean, it's like I have rose-colored glasses. I'm trying to like dig into what you're saying. Like, yeah, I remember that on the swim, the bike. I mean, the bike was hard, but man, I fell in love with biking. There's something about pushing yourself under your own power from point A to point B, wind in your hair, seeing the scenery, live and direct, like not behind glass in a car, like there. I just loved it. I mean, I was so excited to be out there. I didn't care how slow or how fast I was. The bike, I did the bike and my times were abysmal, but I'm thinking about the race chair, it's like I had a fancy top end, race chair, and there's one hill in there. If people know Santa Cruz, like, usually they go backwards because it's so steep that the way that a racing chair is balanced, if it's too steep, you'll fall backwards and turtle and be stuck on your back. So you go backwards instead, or one of my buddies, because I had 25, 30 people out there cheering for me, my family, my friends there to watch me. And they were on that hill. My buddy just put his foot out. I mean, I was in the open division. I wasn't trying to compete for money, and, no race officiant's going to kick me out. So he put a foot behind my back tire. I got a few strokes up that hill, and then he put a foot behind my tire, and I'm just like, thanks, man. And a few more strokes, and just took forever. And I don't remember. Yeah. I mean, it was horrible. Of course it was horrible, but I didn't know any better. The ignorance is bliss, man. I was just doing it. And I got to the finish line. I crossed the finish line. There's this cool video, my friend's iPhone of me just like, it looks horrible. I got the big mitts, and I look at my technique now and I'm like, look at that rookie, you know, but I crossed the finish line and everyone was happy. And, you know, I was off to the races of that like finish line feeling that you get in triathlon or any, you know, endurance race. That's just like, you know, it's, you know, what do they call it? Like your, the endurance race experience is like excited and nervous at the start. You know, you get into it, you feel good, you get somewhere towards the middle, especially in Ironman. There's always a bewitching hour where you're like, why am I doing this? I want to quit now. I'm never going to do this again. You know, I should just quit now because who really cares? And, you know, able-bodied or para, it doesn't matter. You know, like you have this bewitching hour of, you know, of where you're just like in this, like, I hate my life. Why am I doing this? Why did I, you know, I'm never going to do this again. Get me out of here. I just want to go home. And then you get a second wind, then you're good. Then you hit the finish line, you know, and there's the finish line and the medal and the water and the bananas and the people and everyone. And you're like, when can we do this again? It's, you know, it gets you.
How did that fit in the context of your original accident? You had the original accident, then you ended up in the hospital. You realized that you were paralyzed. Then you came back to triathlon. Was this a signpost moment when you crossed the line in terms of where you'd come from?
Absolutely. I mean, it was like, you know, I mean, there's nothing more like esteem building than like doing what you said you were going to do. You know, I set a goal and I went out and I did it. It didn't matter. Like, and this is the everyday Joe part of it to me is that like, I got, you know, when you and I met, I was sitting with Patrick Willis, who's a, you know, NFL star, who's arguing with me on whether or not I'm an elite athlete. He's telling me I am. I'm telling him I'm not, and I'm okay with that. It was the most surreal, you know, debate over the fireside. You know, it was hilarious. But the point being, like, I mean, you know, there's data for my, you know, for the way I look at myself, because before and even now, you know, like, I was middle of the pack for my age group. They lined you up against your age group in like either like 5 or 10 year, you know, brackets, 20 to 30, 30 to 40. In my bracket, before I was injured, I always, when I got good, the best I got was the middle of the pack. Always. There was 100 people before me, 100 people behind me, you know, and even in paratriathlon, I would almost argue I'm worse in paratriathlon. The only difference is I'm the one that shows up at, you know, all the time. And sometimes there's 2 people there, sometimes there's 5 people there, but it didn't matter to me where I was going originally, like where I finish. It just matters that I finished and that I was better than I was yesterday. That was my only benchmark, you know, and it's like, and that, you know, and that goes for everything in life. You know, it's like, if I can just be better than I was last time, then I can see that I'm making progress. And that's a good recipe for living for me.
I would imagine that allows you to be happy as well, happy in your life. You're not searching for something that is so elusive that you'll never get there, and that you keep beating yourself up each time you come home and go, oh, I'm no good. I'm no good. This is it. So how did you come to this idea of, I mean, this recipe in a lot of ways for happiness, for contentment within your sport?
I'll tell you, I had the good fortune out of difficult circumstances to get a lot of mentoring. So I was a surprise. I like to say I was an oops for my mom and my dad. My dad was the bartender. My mom was the waitress, you know, at the Hacienda in Fresno. And they, you know, I was a surprise. They tried to get married. It didn't really work out. And so I grew up, you know, in a, you know, broken home, child of divorce, like these labels that don't mean anything to me. Because I was fortunate to have like an extended family of grandparents, especially my grandmother, who really took, you know, they really took after me when I was born. They were like, you know, we're going to do everything we can for this kid. And my mom put me in karate. And there's a long, like my mom put me, let me back up. My mom remarried a bodybuilder who was a stereotypical like Gold's Gym 80s, 90s, 70s, 80s bodybuilder who
Big
said,
muscles, small shirt.
I don't want to raise a kid who's soft. I was 8. And that all makes sense today, you know, like that all the travesty of that all makes sense today. But in the 80s, you know, the early 80s, like the mid 80s, whatever that was, like that was kind of like the norm, you know, and no one looked at it and went, oh, you know, ugh, you know. Maybe some people did, but not like they do today. And so he put me in Taekwondo, and then we moved to Seattle, and they immediately got divorced. They were probably married for 2 or 3 years. And my mom wanted to keep me in karate because she did see the benefits of it, and not even just with like, you know, getting tough. It was just the benefits of me getting out there and having a sport.
And the social benefit. What about the mental? I mean, because karate is such a study too. Was it that
Yeah.
part?
So my mom met a guy who grew up in karate, really successful in telecom, and then he started his own karate school out of his own stress. And his style, Shudokan Karate Do, it's like, you can't really see it, but my black belt certificate that I got when I was 14 is right here because it means that much to me.
Yeah.
But like, the style is like very full on Karate Kid, Okinawan Karate Do that cares more about your character and who you are than how well you can kick and punch. And one of the lessons that he taught, to answer your question finally, is he would say to us when we go to tournaments, I don't want to be known for having the best winners. That's great, you know, and we'll celebrate that. Because, but I want to be known for having the best losers. So for instance, if you lose on the most obvious worst call ever in the history of karate, you know, they missed your punch and you got, you know, whatever, and he didn't make contact, but they called the point for the other guy, and you lose, you respect, you know, you respect the officials and you respect your opponent. You go to your line, you bow with respect, you bow and thank your judges, and we will go home and we will figure out how to make you better when we get home. But you walk out of that tournament like you walked in, regardless of the outcome. And that, amongst many other lessons, like, was the one that applies here that really got me to be okay with losing, and knowing that, like, you know, like losing or whatever other better word you want to use is not the end. It's an opportunity to learn to get better. My horrible swim in Malibu was not the end. I suck, quit, never do the sport again. It was like, okay, now I have a baseline, you know, and how do I go up from there? And that's what was underneath, you know, my getting hooked in Malibu doing that swim. That, and just another one, I had another mentor when an adult in life who talked about like building piles. You can build one of two piles in your life, either a pile of evidence of how much you suck, basically, or you can build a pile of evidence about how great you are. Like, let me ask the obvious question: which one do you want to add to? You know, and this was part in the context of goal setting. And she goes, you know, and she would say, you know, most people are like worried about this suck pile. You know, like, why don't we focus on this greatness pile and build a mountain of evidence about how great you are, we are, you know, and not to, you know, be a jerk and have a big ego, but to have confidence that, like, you know, I'm good, you know, I'm good and I can get better at whatever I choose to put my effort into.
Were you that kid already, or was this a massive transformation for you, learning how to lose well, learning how to add to that pile to the positive side?
That's always been my contentious argument about myself around, like, you know, is it nature or nurture? I mean, my dad's always been the chill, you know, bartender, you know, like, he's always been the good humor guy, and I've definitely got some of that. But I think it was karate, you know, and the influence of that lesson and many others that, like, molded me, you know, and it sought me out to, like, it created a foundation of where, like, even later in life, because I came from I was a surprise. I came from a broken home. You know, it was me and my mom and two cats, you know, growing up in high school. And then, you know, my mom was diagnosed like severely bipolar. It finally had a name when I was 17. Before that, she was just a wild case from the time she was a teenager. And I grew up in that. And again, like, we're fortunate my grandparents really, like, really just were attentive to me and gave me a lot of attention and would take me for weekends or summers. And my dad would take me for a summer. He was in California and I was in Seattle. But like, I had every opportunity to I don't know, screw up, and no one would have expected any more or less. You know, I'm the black sheep of my family. I have 3 siblings on my dad's side who are very much older than me, who are very content living, you know, their lives in Fresno, you know, and just kind of living normal, pleasant life. And I'm the one who's like, I'm gonna try to go to Pepperdine, you know, the second most expensive school in California, to USC. Why? Because there's volleyball and beaches there, you know, like, and I'm 5'8". I'm half Filipino and I'm 5'8", but I want to go play volleyball at Pepperdine, you know, and I got in, you know, and then I, you know, and same thing with, you know, triathlon was the same thing of like, I'm just gonna go do this thing. And now I'm known for it. You know, I have this poster on my wall, you know, and I'm known for this thing that like, no one would have said that 10 years ago, which is 3 years prior to me being injured. You know, no, I wasn't associated with triathlon at all.
Well, you seem to have picked up so much, I mean, from the karate, but then also you have to have picked up so much from living with your mother who was bipolar and undiagnosed. And then you had your friends who raised $17,000 so that you could get your equipment. Was there a responsibility? Was there an opportunity? What did you have in terms of a voice as you got into triathlon? I mean, it's not necessarily just what you're doing, right? I mean, it's kind of like,
yeah,
who you are more so. How did that work?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think in that last vein, like I built this guy. Like I'm very certain that like I could have been a lot of things, but I built this guy because I chose to believe, you know, when grandma said you can do anything you put your mind to, you know, and fortunately for me, like I had some wins early on. I got my black belt, or actually my first black belt test I failed. And I was my sensei's 17th black belt. So it was a very small school at that point. It's gone on to become very successful and thousands of students. And I don't know if he's in the thousands, but hundreds of black belts, you know, and I was number 17 and I failed my first test. And they're like, dude, you didn't show up, you know, like what the heck? And so I don't know how many months later I tested again and got my black belt. And then I taught, you know, part of it was from 8 years old, I was getting these lessons. And I was, you know, learning about karate, like given this, the awesome thing about traditional karate is like, it's a martial art, you know, you're taught, it's kicking and punching and I'm trying not to use the word violent, you know, inherently it's about conflict and violence, but the rule is to never use it. You know, like if you got in a fight over words in high school or as a kid in my dojo, you're out. Just like there's, you know, if it's not defending, you know, defending for a real reason or a real threat, if it's over words in the hallway, like you're out. Like that's just, and there were kids who were kicked out. Well, I think where I was going was I got my black belt at 14, and by the time I could drive, the next thing I did was start to teach. And I had kids who were 8 years old looking up at me, you know, and I could see the look in their eyes that I had looking up at my sensei. And that circle of life at 16, like that I'll never forget, you know, like that responsibility to, you know, to be for them what my sensei was for me, and knowing that I had all the tools because I had been practicing them for so long, like that circle of life responsibility definitely kicked in. And the same thing with, like you said, like my friends and the money and all that good stuff. It was like that reciprocity and exchange of energy. I did feel responsible to them, but in the greatest way, because people had my back. And again, it wasn't about finishing or winning even, or maybe the other way around. It wasn't about winning or even really finishing. It was about, you know, the battle, the fight, the struggle, you know, to go do it. Like they're just like this. I fundraised the second year to go do an Ironman and continue my racing. And one of my friends who was racing in France, I was at the half Ironman World Championships in France. one of my triathlon friends was there as well racing, and we had lunch, and and she just said very succinctly, it was just like, Rob, like, we love being a part of your journey, like when you write about it in your blog, and up or down or sideways, like what you learn, and just to see you, go through this, we're on this journey with you. And if we can support it by giving money, like, it's not a thing, like the whole, I don't want to be a charity case argument for me was only me holding me back. Everyone else was willing. Yeah, I'll put in 100. High school friends I hadn't seen in 10 years came through with like $1,000, like 2 or 3 of them. And I immediately got a hold of them and was like, what the heck, dude? And they're like, hey man, go rock that triathlon. That was it. And it just, it's like that. It's awesome to create that, like that swell of energy and that support, and to feel it, and to know that, like, it's not about whether I win like a sponsor, it's not like whether I even finish. It's just about, they love being on this journey with me. And that, like, that definitely keeps me going. When I don't feel that connection because I'm not writing or something like, or things like that, that's when it starts to get darker.
Do you feel like you've created your life? I mean, it's so easy for so many of us to be victims of our lives, victims of circumstance, but you've made choices to create your life, to surround yourself with a community, possibly more of a community than you realized. How much of that is conscious? How much of that is not conscious, in sort of making those choices, making the choices coming out of your youth, those kinds of things?
It's funny you say that, because I made t-shirts for that fundraiser, and literally it was hashtag you create your life, create in red.
You're saying yes.
Did you know that, Chris? Yeah, I mean, I had another coach who like a life coach type of coach, who has this saying, is that my faith or my belief in my creation is bigger than my current circumstances. And she makes you repeat that over and over and over again. My faith and belief in my creation is bigger than my current circumstances. And so create's always been a word for me that I've always had on a wall or something. And I've always had those influences. Like, I didn't know that I had my own like Tony Robbins and my sensei growing up. And then after I graduated, like, I've just always been, I think where it comes from is I had this argument with my mom over like Air Jordans back in the day, that like, she would say, you have champagne tastes and a beer pocketbook. And, she had a good union job at AT&T, and it was miserable, but it paid the bills, barely. And I was like, you're miserable. I'm 14 and I have the rest of my life, because the other side was this karate world, where it was in Issaquah, which is like where Microsoft was exploding and everyone from Microsoft was moving to. And so I saw the other side, and I was a part of that world, and they all, I taught their children, and everything there was about, it's possible, you can have this too, like that was always the message I was getting there. So I was like, I have, the rest of my years to go earn a champagne pocketbook to go with my champagne taste. Like, I'm going to level up this one and not level down this, my pocketbook for what, like, I don't want to be miserable. And so that has always been, I think, a driving fire underneath me to like always do better. So when I got out of, college, I invested in those personal growth seminars, and I make fun of them, and I went back and I got the next one, and I went to the retreat one, and then I coached the goal, I did the goal setting program, and then I coached the goal setting program. I really invested and really like tackled those themes in a lot of different ways, from a student, to a student again, then to a teacher showing someone else, and so like I saw all sides of what worked for me and what didn't work for me. And then I got to a point where I was like, this stuff has to work in the real world and not in the bubble of the seminar room. And I took it out, and I tested my wares, and that molded it even more. And then, and even again, I can be as, cynical and sarcastic about it all as well. Like the Michael Jordan, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me in the mirror joke from Saturday Night Live. But then when I hit the ICU, all those people rushed to me. One of them asked me and said, Rob, do you have this energy, whatever you want to call it, when we're here, this bravery when we're here, and then we all leave, the lights go out, sun goes down, then you cry yourself to sleep? Like, you can tell me if that's how it works. I was like, I haven't yet. And that night I used the tools that I learned in the seminar room. I checked in, like, am I pushing something down that I need to let loose? Am I, and there was nothing there. And for a few nights, I kind of did that a few times, and there was nothing there. It was like all these tools that I invested in. I prepaid the counselor, the psychologist. It was like I had all these tools, and they were so ingrained that when tragedy struck, they were right there. The tools were there for me to use. Mental, judo tools were there for me to cope.
Mentors have been so important in your life. What are you doing as a mentor right now?
You asked that question, I immediately think I need to do more. But the truth is like,
I'm not telling you need to do more.
I know, like I always remind myself, like, crossing the finish at Kona line, the finish in Kona in October is taking, justifiably so, most of my energy. That said, like I when I moved to LA, I immediately got in touch with Angel City Games, and as a place to give back, I'm coaching track in the Angel City Games in like next month. And went out there, and anywhere actually you can come in for free and do most Paralympic sports in like June. It's like 2 weeks from now, the 24th, 25th, 26th.
Yeah, amazing organization, Angel.
Yeah, and I met Clayton. You know what I did? I met Clayton at an Abilities Expo, and I pounced on him. I was like, I want to play in your sandbox. Like, I'm doing triathlon and I can coach stuff. And no. And he's like, whoa, and after a while, he just said, Rob, listen, like this is your sandbox. You're in the sandbox. Like, let's go. Like, let's go play. And so, and that's how we met. That's how through him is how I got invited to the Athlete's Voice certificate program where we met. And so that is the way, anyone, like there's a guy in Sanger in Central California, we were talking about smart trainers, like anytime someone I'm a total gearhead about every bolt on my race chair and hand cycle and everything. And so, sharing that knowledge amongst other people, I'm always open to it, but like once this feat is accomplished, there'll be much more of that coming to just, that's just coaching in the sport, doing some of the similar things that you do, just to evangelize the idea of like, there's still a life to live and there's great things to be done, is in there, and how that's going to unfold is still being written.
How important is it, the mentor side, for your personal health too?
It's huge. I mean, I think it must have been Sensei in karate where I really understood the importance of that, and finding people who can support you and are willing. It's same thing as raising the money. All you have to do is ask and be relentless about seeking. And there's a million people out there who have tread the ground before you. There isn't much, Kilimanjaro on a hand cycle. Okay, Chris, that one. Okay, there's that one. There's not someone before you, Chris. There wasn't. But I got you, Carlos has you. And so, and that's how the world spins. Like there's very few things besides that, where someone hasn't been down that road before you, whether it's just surviving an SCI, whether it's, a hand cycle division in Ironman, whether it's, trouble with school in any direction. My grandmother worked with kids in preschool. She had a preschool and worked with them, and impacted hundreds of kids' kids' lives in that, beginning fertile ground. It's all out there. Support is out there. You just have to be relentless about seeking it. And I learned the key of that about, like, it wasn't a Michael Jordan quote, but it was one of those, like, I can't accept not trying. I think that was Kings, the hockey player.
Okay.
Everyone's out there going, this guy, I forget his name all of a sudden. Wayne Gretzky. He said, I can't accept not trying, like, I'm okay with getting an N-O, but I'm not okay with never K-N-O-W-ing. I'd rather get a no when someone say that to me to my face. I preface a lot of when I meet strangers who, might have something that I want, that I want to learn. I often say, like, tell me no immediately, please. But I'd rather have you say that to me than for me to never, have asked for your time or this or whatever.
This is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing the way that you've navigated through your life. I mean, we all have ups and downs, and we have challenges, and sometimes our challenges seem like they're way bigger to us than they are to other people, or other people's challenges seem way bigger than ours are, or whatever it is. There's a back and forth on all of that, but your outlook and your willingness to share your knowledge and continue to grow in your knowledge is just absolutely remarkable. So thanks so much for joining us, Rob. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Chris. It's great to talk to you and see you.
Always a pleasure, man. And thank you to all of you. Really appreciate it. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Please, as we say every week, if you enjoyed this, please tell your friends. Please like us. Please follow us. This will be a traditional podcast. So if you can like and follow and tell your friends, we will see you with another great episode next week. Thanks a ton. Take care. Bye.